So when you're getting ready to buy any piece of real estate, whether it's raw land to build a structure on or an existing structure, you need to visit that site a few times at different times of the day and different times of the week. If you're moving into a neighborhood, or maybe you want to buy a little commercial property, you need to understand traffic flow and what, school kids and what kind of pedestrian traffic. On a site like this, one of the first things when you're walking onto raw land is you've got to understand the soil conditions and where the water is going. Those two things can completely disrupt any construction schedules, construction method. They can multiply expenses. For instance, on this site, if you look up here, this development has happened in a draw, a natural declivity. So there's some amount of water that has always come down this little draw, and it's going to have to be dealt with. Water and gravity will cause soils to move downhill. This is not a surprise. Now in the background, can you see those riprap walls, those rock walls stacked over there? Those were put in there after the houses were built because water drainage and slopes were not properly understood. And after the structures were put in, sure enough, Mother Nature started moving the hillside down to fill the voids that were created by the building pads. So I brought Carl Broda onto this site. He's a local geotechnical guy, very thorough, very informed, very sharp, and he helped us discover a couple of things. So Carl's done sort of a walkover, looked at some of where the cuts and fills may or may not be occurring, looked at some of the slopes sloping down to the other lots. He has a DCP, that's a drive cone penetrometer, that he's going to use to test the compaction out here in the fill area. Carl, what are you looking for when you make these blows and push that thing into the ground?
Well, it's driving into the ground and may count every foot how many blows. And obviously the more blows, the harder it goes. The softer the ground is.
So how's that for a piece of instrumentation that on the surface is elementary, but in fact is determining something that can be determined in no other way? And that is, there's a sliding hammer, runs up and down this, I don't know if that's 5/8 diameter, probably a carbon steel rod.
Yeah.
Drives this instrument, which is calibrated with some grooves. Let me film that here in a second. Okay. And he just counts the blows, which is a fairly accurate measurement of how much energy, how much impact it takes to push into the subgrade.
See how soft it got?
Yeah, just soft.
So anyways, the first foot was about 8 blows per foot. Because it's of surface compaction, usually we see it a little higher. Down below start getting softer, as you saw, it's about 6 a foot. Maybe we'll go another foot, the third foot. See what we get. 1, 2, 3, 4. See, that's softer, it's gapped. That's again softer, 6 again. So it's quite soft, certainly not compacted fill, not ready for the foundation.
This is important information. If you come on a building lot like this and it's nicely terraced and there's slopes down to the other lots and you think, well, I'm just going to sprinkle some gravel out on there and build my house. What a mistake that would be here, because what Carl just discovered was it took 6 blows to drive this instrument through the first foot. Yeah. That translates to what? A very marginal bearing condition at best.
It's come to about 650 pounds per square foot.
So that translates to 650 pounds per square foot soil bearing capacity in the top 12 inches. The next foot went through in 4 or 5 blows, and from there on down, progressive.
Also 4 or 5, fairly soft. So the whole fill is quite soft. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter that this has been sitting here 10 years. It was not mechanically compacted. Yeah. What that means is the contractor that built the site pushed the cut out into the fill, ran his tractor over it once just to get level enough he could drive on it, built up, and then in the top foot he made a token gesture at compaction, so people like me would be fooled into buying a lot like this, and then suddenly discover that the foundation I put under my house was settling and the drywall was cracking. That's why Mr. Broda is maybe one of the most important men to bring onto a site before you buy the lot.
For compacted fill with material like that, we would expect about 18 blows to be compacted properly. For 1,500 pounds, if you want 1,500 the minimum, probably 12 blows would be necessary. So we're talking about half or less than half of what we would consider adequate for holding a house. Otherwise it will settle suddenly, especially if you have this part sitting on the fill, the other part sitting on the cut. which is obviously going to be much harder.
So you see the exposure that he's just saved me from. I put a house on this lot without reconstructing the fill. Half of it's on a cut, so it's rigid. The other half's on a fill and it falls down. Terrible cracking, terrible liability, terrible exposure. Lesson one, make sure you understand what you're building your house on. A wise man builds his house upon a rock. So we do not yet have Carl Broda's full site workup. I just have his initial visit and the initial compaction tests. You saw how that worked. But we know that we're going to have to put retaining walls on 3 sides of this lot. We're going to cut the toe of this slope back some distance, probably to where about a 4-foot retaining wall will zero out with the existing slope to try to pick up about maybe 6 or 8 feet of additional buildable space. The material that comes out of this toe will be relocated out on the front where we're creating additional space. The retaining wall will come down here to the end, to the property line, which is about halfway down this 60% slope, head straight out to the yard, to the street. This is going to be a serious little structure because there's a lot of retaining going on. And then the retaining wall will turn and head back up towards the driveway so that we can maximize the footprint of the usable space. All of the fill that's in this part of the pad will be removed because it's soft, replaced, made structural through compaction. The stuff that comes off the toe will go into the additional retaining areas. We're going to make a nice site for a nice house, and you get to watch. Okay, so lesson 1 in our series. Understand what you're buying. Understand drainage, understand soil conditions, understand utilities, availability and cost, whether you have to develop the utilities yourself or if you're hooking onto a municipal system. Understand the details around clear title. That includes easements and liens and prior claims. That's what a title company does. An owner is typically, and you need to make sure the owner, their obligation is to provide clear title. Any of these things not properly tended can sink your ship before you get your sail even unfurled, okay? It will sink you if you do not understand all of the ramifications of the property that you're buying and the way that that will impact your costs and your timelines. So it's nothing to be afraid of, but there's a great deal of education that you need to have before you go down this road.